I'd like to call the meeting to order and move immediately to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is the Mosinee School District's annual meeting, and this is the only meeting of the year where I actually chair the meeting for a few minutes. Initially, we're going to get started with a call by me for motions to nominate someone to be the chairperson for the annual Board of Education meeting. Yes.
I'll make a nomination to nominate Diane Gorman.
I'll second that.
The meeting.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any other?
Doesn't need a second.
Oh.
That's all right.
Okay.
It's all right.
All right. Voice vote?
Any other nominations?
Any other
Three times.
nominations?
3 times.
Not hearing any other nominations. Any other nominations?
I'll move to recommend that those in attendance cast a unanimous ballot to close nominations and elect Diane Gorman to chair the meeting.
All in favor of electing Diane Gorman as chairman of the annual meeting, say so by indicating yes.
Yes.
Yes. And those not in favor, no.
Just a reminder, this is also for them out there.
Correct. You know,
Remember, everybody gets to vote.
all right, Mrs. Gorman, taking over the meeting from here.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Diane.
All right, we are moving on to appointment of person to take minutes and a parliamentarian. I would ask that Sarah Tomer please continue to take the minutes. And Mr. Herman, would you be?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Moving on to the report to the district residents. Mr. Munoz.
Yeah, I have a letter that I wrote in here, updated for this year. The Mosinee School District, we continue to strive as one of the best school districts in Marathon County. We're big enough to have amazing opportunities for all, but small enough that we know your name. We lead all districts in Marathon County with earned dual credit courses at North Central Technical College, which regularly saves Mosinee School District parents over $400,000 a year. Mosinee High School juniors regularly test at or near the top of all county school districts on the ACT. Moving further down in that, jumping around a little bit, the Mosinee School District also, as a whole, exceeded expectations on the state report card as a district. We're also being recognized in 2 out of 3 buildings for outstanding PBIS programs. The Mosinee School District continues to be a destination district with students succeeding in all of our buildings at an extremely high level. I do want to thank all of our staff, in particular staff not just present, but all staff in the entire district for all of their efforts in this regard. We could not do this without them.
Mr. Munoz, would you share what PBIS is for those in the room?
Yeah, Positive Behavioral Intervention Support. So a few years ago, PBIS became RTI, Response to Intervention. So essentially, PBIS is the behavioral component of interventions. If students need correction or teaching with respect to behaviors, it happens in any number of different ways, but differently in the elementary school, middle school, and high school. So we have, that's oversaw by Kirsten Kalagi, our mental health navigator, through her meetings in all the buildings. They have building meetings and district meetings. One thing to note, the pool, the auditorium, the Fad Lab, and the fitness center continue to be open for our community to enjoy. We did have some changes this year, which we're excited about. We have a new partnership with Woodson YMCA, a continuing partnership, to enhance our community education programs, which has been approved by the board already. Through this partnership with the district and the YMCA, we offer a wide range of enjoyable educational, social, and recreational opportunities. One big piece is you'll note that Ben Wisniewski, a longtime resident, when I first arrived to the district 3.5 years ago, Ben was here working in a different capacity in the pool. He's since left and has now returned, and we're excited to have Ben back. As part, he's now got a position with the YMCA, He has a deep commitment to our community. We're excited to have him on board as he finished his degree and had a job before coming back. So we're excited to have him back. In terms of our financial position, remains strong. Michelle Brown will be getting to that momentarily. Our fund balance is in excess of 25% with over $4 million approved construction spending for a middle school remodel and cafeteria addition. So you will notice a deficit budget, which the school board planned. In other words, we created the deficit in order to pay cash for the expenditures at the middle school. And I was at the middle school earlier today. They're pouring floors. A lot of the walls are up, and you'll see that at our next board meeting. So a substantial part of that project is already well into phase one. Phase one of that project should be done by Christmas of this year. So the new cafeteria at the middle school, which is also a commons and be used actively by the community on the weekend, should be operational by Christmas of this year in a few months. There's more of that project to come inside of the building, which should be done by the end of next summer, which we're excited about. So this is directly related to our strategic plan. We pushed heavily from Fund 46, several other pieces, but that is a big part of why we structured a deficit budget. It was a decision the board made, and we went in that direction. Fund 73 has been heavily used this past year with support staff and teaching staff. Well over $2 million was committed from our Fund 73. And just to clarify, Fund 73 is post-employment benefits. So this is something that we had already had some things structured for teachers out of Fund 73, but it was greatly enhanced through a committee which Michelle Brown ran, and several staff were involved in, and board members, including, I believe, Mr. Hermaning and Mrs. Stankowski. So it was a wonderful committee, and it came up with a lot of positives for our staff, including improved benefits in post-employment benefits. We also increased those Fund 73 post-employment benefits for support staff who are year-round support staff. So we were excited to be able to do that as well. I'll continue to say before we jump into the actual budget piece of the meeting that I'm excited to continue to serve as the superintendent of the Mosinee School District. We have an outstanding staff and an outstanding community. Some amazing parents. I happen to live right in the middle of town, so I'm regularly around a great number of parents, whether at church or at the Piggly Wiggly or wherever I am in town. It's a wonderful community. It's a wonderful academic community, but one that I just want to reiterate. We're extremely thankful for our staff, for their commitment, especially through the end of the COVID pandemic, but also as we come out of that. The next step is to jump in. Let me just jump back, make sure I'm not skipping anything. The proposed budget. Before I jump into the proposed budget, at the very start of this presentation, which I'll pull up, before I have Michelle Brown step up to the podium, I am going to jump into a piece that we have embedded here, actually right there. We had a community member at last year's board annual meeting who happens to be present, but who had recommended that we take a look at a few of these items here about the instructional program. So I had Rob Way put this together so that we could do a brief overview, which I will do before we move into the financial aspects of everything. The district report card. Our overall score is 73.6. 4-star rating. District exceeds state expectations. Meets or exceeds on achievement, growth, and on track to graduation. So there's going to be a couple of elements that I'll jump into here based on that. Let me just get my notes out here. Achievement. And you'll just note the red marks are the state of Wisconsin. And the district for ELA, so English and then math, you see English here as a district, the state. So we're exceeding the state in both English and math overall statistically. Growth is the next piece, and you can see this in your packet as well. Growth is a little bit more difficult, but you can see in math we substantially are above the state with respect to growth. I want to just take a couple of seconds about growth, because if people are achieving at the highest level, they're actually going to have really low growth because they have nowhere to go. So these sorts of numbers are a positive. Our growth as it relates to the state, meaning how are we growing, how are we improving in English and math over time. On track to graduation. You'll note the Mosinee School District is in purple on the left in each of these slides. Chronic absenteeism. Now when you look at that number, you might think that that's a negative number, but I want to explain how it's a positive number. Because when you first look at it, it's, oh wow, the chronic absenteeism rate is too high. But I want to explain that a little bit, that a student is considered chronically absent if they miss more than 10% of possible attendance days. The chronic absenteeism rate is the number of students who are chronically absent divided by the total number of students who have been enrolled at least 90 days. So what does this mean? Our chronic absenteeism rate is 92.2, the state's at 87. That's actually very good for us. That's a positive number, and I'll explain. The score is 1 minus the actual chronic absenteeism rate. So how you should interpret this is over 3 years at an average of 7.8% of Mosinee students have missed more than 10% of student days. So the negative part of this representation on the left, the chronic absenteeism for both the state and the district, is the white part up top, okay? Now, we're still not happy with the 7.8% of Mosinee students' chronic absenteeism, because that's what it is. And that's why the board has already approved mirror image counseling, and we're working with our administrators in this organization we started last year in order to really dial in on some of the chronic absenteeism. That being said, our chronic absenteeism isn't nearly as bad as a lot of surrounding districts or the state average, like you can see. On track to graduation oops, I skipped, there we go. On track to graduation, you can see that we're ranking relatively high. So on track to graduation, it doesn't mean that there's dropouts up top. It means that some students are behind in credits. So what's behind in credits? At a high school level, it's 4.5 credits a year. All right, that's actually in state statute. So if you're achieving at less than 4.5 credits a year, you're statistically falling behind in those categories. So that's how it's specifically measured, 4.5 credits a year. Now, you want more than that, but that's how it's measured in the state level. All right, on track to graduation. One big number to pay attention to, I know it's third grade, it's hard to think about how that affects everything, but that's actually a really big number. If you have a reading number or an ELA number in third grade that's relatively good, that's a good indicator of future success in middle school and in high school. The same way with that 8th grade math number with on track to graduation. So those are very positive numbers. ACT composite score trend, we are still at or tied with the highest in the county and very good in the state. Just note that we did drop off from 21 to 22, but the entire state dropped off substantially. So the average score was substantially lower in the state. This continues to be a focus in terms of college and career readiness. Some other numbers that the state of Wisconsin is on the bottom over here where the cursor is, and then Mosinee is up top. Oops, that's me with my arthritic hand. ACT average by score by subject, you'll note that dialed into subject areas, we continue to do very well as it relates to the state averages across the board. In all areas, at the state average with writing. Work-based learning experiences. This is something to take note of the next couple slides. Percent of students in work-based learning experiences. Last year is the highest number we've had in almost a decade, over 30%. Actually, it's approaching 35% of our students in work-based learning experiences. This is outstanding. And it's something that I know I've been speaking with Mr. Halverson, it's definitely a continuing focus. Dual credit courses. Now these are not AP courses, we'll get to that in a second. dual credit courses are courses that students take at the high school that count as both college credit, but also high school credit at the same time. And as I said in the opening, we have the most dual credit courses raw number as any high school in the county.
David, how could we have in 2021 with COVID and that, we still were at that level?
Sorry, I had to reboot.
That's all right, I'm trying to catch you before.
Right.
I was just looking at that, I'm like, how did that work?
Well, I mean, dual credit courses, I mean, to the credit of our staff, it may sound like they're taught by other, like professors or something. They're actually taught by our teachers. So you'll go to classes throughout the high school and you'll see that you can earn college credit here. You have those indicators on the walls. They're not everywhere, but it's definitely a focus and it's going to be a continuing focus. Why is there a blip? I mean, it really...
Right, that's what I was looking at. Like,
yeah, that is a little bit of a... I haven't dialed into it, but we definitely could look into that a little bit. You're right, that is pretty substantial. Advanced placement test overall pass rate. United States, the overall pass rate is 57%. The overall pass rate in Wisconsin is 66%. Mosinee High School pass rate was 70%. Total exams are listed there as 132. Now, advanced placement, and I just jumped off the slide, and I don't want to have to go back, but AP courses are similar to dual credit courses in that you can earn college credit that way too. It's just a little bit different process. So the annual fall AP enrollment. So these are enrollments right now. So we have 255 course seats enrollments as of right now, which is healthy, very healthy, very good. So these are AP enrollment numbers, 22-23, but also the last couple of years. So you can see all of the AP classes that we offer, and then what we're currently sitting at, then also what we've done historically in terms of advanced placement courses. Pretty consistent across the board. Okay, and that is the end of the educational piece, which questions? Yes.
Yes. Writing, we're equal, but with the state, Wisconsin and Mosinee. But what I do notice out in society, our children are growing up adults now, they're going to go out in the workforce. The written word is kind of Greek to them. They don't understand it. If we write them a card, a thank you card, they can't read it. Mom, would you read this for me? So
Cursive.
cursive.
Yeah.
And I would like to see some of that change.
I would too.
Yeah, I think I would have to dial in. The writing score, we'd have to dial in, and we can do that perhaps at a C&I committee meeting. Because I'm very confident with all the other scores. The writing score I'm the least confident in, largely because it's done a little bit, I don't know how else to say this, it's done a little bit differently and with how they test it. But I think it would be a really good topic for the C&I committee, specifically the writing. It's a good point that writing is a really important skill, especially when you start to get out into the world, do resumes, and it's a good point. Any other questions before I turn things over to Michelle Brown? Okay, so I'm going to drive the presentation, and Michelle is going to run through the budget, so let me make sure I don't... No, I'm good. Yeah. Oh, good idea. Oh, yeah, that'll be better. We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Yeah, well, good evening, everyone. I am going to provide a general overview of the 22-23 proposed budget that is in your packet. It begins on page 14. We're going to go by different fund groups. Here is an overview of the general fund on this slide, the proposed budget for 22-23. We're looking at a total levy amount of $9,125,887. This is a 13.5% decrease from the previous tax levy. The mill rate is projected to be $6.32 based on an increase of 10.8% in property values. And that's over the entire district. Each municipality, village and town, city may change in a different way. They may increase higher than 10.8 or decrease lower, or possibly even stay the same. Also,
So just to help with that point a little bit, so the mill rate is dropping substantially to 632. So I live in the city of Mosinee, so my rate is a little bit different than somebody who lives in Moon, for example, because we have a different, I mean, that's what you
yes,
meant, right?
Yes, exactly.
And like somebody in Cronenwether, because I live in the city of Mosinee, and then town of Mosinee as well. So overall, for all of the municipalities that feed into the Mosinee School District, it's 632. The mill rate will be 632, with the understanding that there's going to be some variation.
There will be some fluctuation. Yes.
Based on where people actually
That
live.
is correct.
Okay,
That is correct.
this one of
And
the-
this would only be the levy rate for, well, if your property increased by the 10.8, and then also, as a district as a whole, but, they're still taxing by, your municipality for other things too, such as the county, the city, the community college district.
Okay.
Ending fund balance.
Okay.
The ending fund balance in this projected budget is $7.6 million. That is down, we started the year at a little over 30%, and this would bring fund balance down to 28%. We're looking at projected revenue limit of $21,838,398. That is determined, that's not anything we can change. It's basically determined by the factors such as our student enrollment, our previous year revenue limit, and then any change that is allowed in the state budget or per pupil. And our general aid estimate in this budget is the July 1st aid estimate of $13.9 million. And we do have a few declining enrollment exemptions. Budget is also based on a September student FTE of 1933, and we're actually looking at a student FTE of 1937, so there'll be a slight change in that. That was based on our third Friday count.
Just let me know when you want me to jump
Yeah,
off.
you can change that.
Okay.
Yeah. So in looking at our revenue by source, it's broken out into the largest area is our state revenue, and that includes such things as general aids and other state grants. The next largest area are our local revenues. That includes student fees, property taxes is the biggest piece of that. And in this budget, that 7.2 million slice, 6.8 million of that would be the property tax levy for the general fund. The third largest is inter-district, and that includes things such as open enrollment, which is the majority of that slice. Then federal revenue, this includes title grants, IDEA grants, ESSER, Perkins, and other federal grants. And then there's a small slice, other sources. This includes refunds, insurance rebates, E-rate. And then intermediate is very small, and those are pass-throughs, such as like a pass-through revenue from CISA or other colleges.
Okay.
Then expenditures by purpose, and this is kind of just a large overview. We're looking at the instruction is the largest piece, and then support services let me back up to instruction. That would include all types of instruction, you know, from your general classroom to art, PE, all of those things. And then support services, pupil services, transportation, facilities, business, all administration takes a large piece. And then non-program, we're looking at a little over $6 million, and that is for open enrollment, tuition payments, transfers, and other non-program expenses.
Okay.
Then this is expenditures by object, and looking at the largest piece, our salaries and benefits. We're very labor intensive, teaching children, and then we, salary and benefit. And then we have services. Again, this would include open enrollment, transportation services, business services, legal, CISA that we contract with for other instructional services. And then we have transfers to other funds, and that takes a big spot too. That's a big slice. And then capital and non-capital items. And the very smallest are other, and it's basically like dues and fees or other miscellaneous expenses that aren't required somewhere else. So then in looking at the other funds, we're required to put things in different funds. We have Fund 21 and 27, they're called special project funds. Fund 21 are mainly donations and student activities. Fund 27 is our special education fund. So we're looking at a beginning Fund 21 balance, which is all Fund 21, because Fund 27 cannot have a balance at year end or the beginning of the year, but $549,902, and then revenues of $5.7 million, expenditures of $5.6, an ending fund balance, again, Fund 21 of $643,855. This budget for special education piece of this budget is $5.2 million. And then of that, the revenues, the transfer from Fund 10 is $2.8 million.
Okay.
Fund 27 is not self-sustaining.
Could you explain what you mean by that?
The revenues in Fund 21 without a transfer are not enough to cover the programs that we have in Fund 27.
So we use Fund 10 as
Yes.
a plan and make sure that we cover services.
Right.
Okay.
So when you look at Fund 10 expenditures, 2.8 million of those expenses are going to cover in Fund 27.
Okay.
Then we have the debt service fund. These are funds 38 and 39, referendum and non-referendum debt. And we're looking at a beginning fund balance of $2.2 million. We have funds in there to pay off debt early. We're looking at this year's revenue, tax revenue, and a very small amount of interest earnings of $1.6 million, expenditures of $3.3, and then an ending fund balance of $601,501. And the next slide shows the current district indebtedness. So this is broken out into Fund 38, science addition, and then the Fund 38 energy efficiency project, and then Fund 39 elementary. And on the right, you see each debt and when the payoff date is for those debts.
What is the district's total indebtedness?
Pardon?
What is the district's total indebtedness? All three of them, the energy, the 6 classrooms, and then the elementary school, all added up.
I have that here.
A little over 17 million. Right? Yeah, it's a little over 17 million.
That's for the total, for the district.
Yeah, it's 11 million, it's a good question, 11,090,000 add 3.675 million, add 2.645 million.
About 17 million?
Little over, yeah,
Okay.
little over 17 million. I think this is an important slide for the community for multiple years, especially looking at the elementary school debt, which is set to be paid off in a very short window. The reason I think we should focus on that for a second is that the elementary school debt is the only debt here that's referendum debt.
Yeah.
So that's the only debt that's Fund 38 referendum debt. And we are set to pay that off in a very short number of years. So the reason I bring that up a couple of times is the remainder debt here is Fund 39, so it's non-referendum debt, but still spread out over many years. The mill rate in a few years, a very few short years, once we pay off the elementary school, and the board members here in the community should remember that all of that money that was sitting here, that 2.295 million, that big chunk of money is sitting there because the board made a decision about a year and a half ago to defease debt. In other words, to pay debt down earlier as a financial way to say, hey, let's put this behind us. It's a fiscal, really responsible thing to do. That being said, it shortened the time to when that referendum debt over here in the orange, 2.645 million, once that's paid off, the mill will drop again, and we have to be really cautious as a community about that. So because of revenue limits and property valuations, it's more advantageous fiscally to keep our mill rate relatively steady, which would be our recommendation to take that into consideration. Michelle?
And two, Coronaware is gonna pay off their tip in about 2 years, and that's gonna be a big chunk of change there in our tip, and that's gonna lower it some more. I mean, because that's where that comes into what you're saying, communities pay different rates, because Coronaware, they subtract that out, and then we have to pay more, the rest of us taxpayers pay more, as did with Mosinee. And those are the two communities with TIF districts.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's gonna be an impact there when that goes, that kicks in there.
That's a good
Yes.
point. And the reason I think we just, maybe one more minute on this slide, that the way school funding works, not county funding or city funding or anything else like that, just school district funding, we have certain limits on us that the only way that we can get beyond how things are is to go to referendum. That's different than 10 years ago, just based on revenue limits and caps. So we're already levying to the max. There's no more dollars available in the current funding formula. This does not actually help us, the fact that it's a very short window to us paying off good debt. So from a financial situation, it's something that Michelle and I have been talking about for 3 years. We're now getting relatively close to this fiscal cliff.
Can you also please clarify, because we just are, of course, doing some renovations to the middle school.
Yep.
And I think the community would appreciate some clarification that essentially we did that, as you stated, out of fund balance, but which is basically out of savings. So that is why we didn't need to go to referendum. So if you could just clarify that and speak a little bit more to that in layman's terms.
Yeah, absolutely. All the work we're doing at the middle school, and it's gonna be amazing, none of it hits our debt. None of it hits the debt. We looked at the fund balance and made a decision to use the fund balance and lower it to 28%. Remember earlier in the presentation, we were about 34, 35%. So we intentionally lowered the fund balance and went at that project cash without asking the taxpayers for any additional money. So that decision was, I think, a fiscally responsible decision. It kept our fund balance within our board policies, which is between 25 and 30%.
I thought it was 30% last year.
It was 30,
Mr.
Yeah, a
Mr.
little over
President, I
30.
think last year you stated that the district's policy for fund balance was set at 30%, and then you told me there was a 9-0 decision by the board for 30%.
So we have a target of 30%, but we had a floor of 25, I believe.
Well, that,
Yeah.
the
I was
policy.
never aware of that. I know you got 25% and then you got 28% now. I get confused. It
No,
don't take much.
it's a good question. We can pull up the policy after the meeting, and I can show you the policy.
That's okay.
Yeah, the policy
Yeah.
is between 25 and 30%. The
Oh.
policy itself states a range between 25 and,
Okay, if that's the case, but I was always under the impression it was 30, so, you know, that's
Yep.
it. And then I see that you had that 25 above 20, and then we have the 28 now. So, I mean, it's like playing Kenny Rogers card deck, you know, you don't, you know, it's, but anyhow, that's okay. Oh, another thing, as long as you're up there, the student in and student out, are we gaining on that? You know, you enter,
I think
We
we're
have a
coming,
difference of
we're coming to
5.
students, aren't we?
Yes, we are, we're coming to that.
We're coming to students right now.
Before you get to that,
Yep.
Question?
We'll get to your
Sorry.
student question in just a second. Go ahead.
so if I understand correctly, and I don't know the exact percent or amount, but of the $2.6 million of outstanding debt from the elementary school edition referendum, I see in the budget for the next year, there's a $712,000 expenditure. If I understand correctly, that means that about 180,000 of that would be the interest on the remaining 2.6 million. The rest of the $500,000 is principal that we're paying down, right?
Yes, that's
So-
correct.
Certainly from a citizen or taxpayer perspective, the entire $700,000 is being spent, but the excess cost is the interest because we built an asset for it,
Yes.
right? So that $500,000 is just our upcoming school year, the current year, outlay for the principal part of that construction project. The rest is the cost of the fact that we didn't pay cash for it.
Yes.
Which kind of segues, in fact, kind of what you were describing for
Exactly.
the middle school project right now. So we don't have those carrying costs of interest, right?
Right, on the
Okay.
middle school, yes, that is correct. Yeah, and we pay 2 interest payments a year on our debt in October and April, and we pay 1 principal payment in
Okay.
April
Yeah.
on each of our debt.
So it's probably about $60,000 or so per interest
Yes,
payment
pretty-
now.
That's correct.
And then next April, it'll be a smaller amount, because it'll be on a smaller balance, and so on and so forth, till the last payment is almost all principal.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, and just to
just like a mortgage.
Yep, just to, jump on that point a little bit, that by the board making the decision to lower fund balance from 35% to 28%, there's no interest. We're not paying any bank interest at all. So so these decisions that were made, there's interest with all of these decisions. And the decisions that were made by the board this past year, there's absolutely no interest. We're paying it out. I think that's the connection point.
Yes, and we may get to it again later, or you mentioned that you were talking about it afterward, but the last time that the board changed its policy about fund balance ranges was way back in November of 2019. And at that time, it says that the board will support and continually strive to develop conservative operating budgets that will add and/or maintain sufficient funds to achieve a minimum of 25 to 30% of total actual operating expenses. I didn't know the exact details until I just looked at it. So your question was great.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Michelle, why don't you go ahead there? I think we.
Next is our capital projects fund.
Right.
And we're looking, right now, we have a Fund 46, and that is where we are expensing the middle school cafeteria addition and classroom remodel. That's a $4 million project, a little over $4 million. This year, we start the year with a fund balance of $3 million, revenues of $952,847, and then expenditures of $4 million, and then an ending fund balance of $4,399. And then this is for, we'll still have the classroom remodel portion for next year, portion of it, in next year's budget.
Yeah, this is Fund 46.
Yes.
So just note that Fund 46, when we started here, had about $125 in it, ballpark. And we've built it up through a lot of sound fiscal decisions to this dollar amount. And that's how we're funding the project at the middle school.
The next fund we're going to talk about is the food service fund. We have a larger than anticipated fund balance of $543,330. The reason for this large fund balance is when the USDA made all student meals free, those reimbursement rates that the government, state and federal, gave us were higher than what our normal revenues and charges on those meals were, so we actually added to fund balance during that period. This year, one thing different with our food service is we are contracting with Taher for food service management. That's a one-year emergency contract, and we don't anticipate, meals are not free for everyone anymore, so we don't anticipate larger revenue than expenditures. Very minimal.
Correct.
Community Service Fund. This is our Fund 80. We have a beginning fund balance of $222,469. We're increasing our revenues this year to $617,500. The largest portion of this is the tax levy. We're looking at levying, planning to levy $600,000, and then the other revenues come from charges for people to use facilities.
Yeah, a couple of, Fund 80 is a community service fund, so these are non-educational expenses, like the YMCA, for example, or classes at 5 a.m. in the morning. Police officers, school resource officers can be paid out of Fund 80, so keep that in mind as well.
Then the next slide, just budget highlights. The middle school cafeteria and classroom remodel project, $4 million. ESSER 2 funds in this budget using $303,696. ESSER 3, $511,662. This would totally finish out our ESSER funds. We spent in 21-22 $1.1 million. ESSER 2, I believe ESSER 2. I'll just say ESSER. And then the other one, $439,000, I think, of ESSER 2, $719. So our total ESSER funds, $2.37 million, and these are the remainder that we're spending this year. We just heard, probably within the last month, the governor announced increasing, adding another round of this Kids Ahead funding, another $36,000. That's for social, emotional learning and mental health, and then an additional per pupil funding of $180,351. This shows our September count, membership, and 3-year average. As I said earlier, our proposed budget had a projected Friday FTE of 1933. It actually came out to be 1937. This shows the 3-year average that the budget runs on. We were looking, the revenue runs on 1965, and that is going down slowly, that 3-year average. And then our September FTE is the pink line, and then our membership number is the purple line.
Yeah, so when we arrived, the projected decline We had a very large senior class last year, and a smaller kindergarten class. Just a general look at this is we actually closed that gap. So there was a huge class out, a small class in, and that gap is actually smaller than what we anticipated. And it has been that way for a couple of years. A very similar trend.
Yeah, and as far as open enrollment goes, I thought I had a slide on this, but I don't. But we had 195 students from other districts open enrolled into Mosinee, and 200 Mosinee students, residents, open enrolled out to other districts.
Now, one other question, you have declining enrollment exemption, how does that figure in with the enrollment reduction average? What does that mean, that declining enrollment exemption?
That's when we're calculating our revenue limit, then that takes into account when this average is declining, you know, you see the yellow
Yeah.
line, when that's declining, then they try to keep us where we were the year before, and that's the declining enrollment exemption. It doesn't occur again the next year.
Is that an assigned value?
No, it's based on how much the decline is.
Oh,
Because they're trying to keep us to, you know, what our revenues were per student the year before. With the revenue limit, with tax levy
that
and
being
aid.
said, what are the district's thought on declining enrollment? Is it going to be a continuous decline, or is it going to flatten out, or what are the general thoughts?
It is flattening out, it's getting flatter, as you can see. Most of our class sizes are very similar. I don't, maybe our first grade class is larger than our kindergarten class, but most of the other classes, I believe, are pretty similar in size.
Yeah, first and third grade came up relatively large this year. That was a surprise on actual count. That's just in looking at the numbers. Some larger classes in a few of the middle school classes as well. So the trend is flattening. When we arrived, we looked at declining enrollment numbers that were much larger than what had actually occurred. So what we projected, if you look back 3 years, and what has occurred, it's a substantially smaller decline than what was projected. And the projections are just based on the class going out being this large, and then projected classes.
Would you explain what the difference is between membership and FTE, please?
The membership actually is the FTE. So a count, I believe our count was roughly 1982 of actual students in seats. So then we turn that into, I'm trying to think if I have it handy, I don't think I do. We turn that into like 3-year-old students. If we have some early childhood students, those are worth,
It's like half day and.
Their
Yeah.
FTE is
Got it.
0.5,
Thank you.
4K student is 0.6.
Understood.
And then summer school students are point,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so how summer
Yeah.
schools are equated. So the FT, it's a little complicated, but it's based on,
Yeah.
you know, is it a third, is it a fourth? Is it a fourth, a 4-year-old kindergarten, or is it a summer school piece? But for the calculations of the budget, that top line, 1990, 1985, 1981, and 1965, that's the 3-year average, and that's the key number.
That's the key number for calculating the budget, for
Yes,
sure. Can you
yes.
go back, please?
Yep, sorry.
But I think, Michelle, what you had indicated, and when you use the phrase, it's flattened. I think what you're saying is that if we have a year next year similar to this year, that gold line that appears that it's going down quite a bit, it'll remove that 2019 to 20 year from the calculation, because you can see that the purple now, which is our membership, the number of students, is actually higher now than it was 2 years ago. Certainly, they're all lower than 4 years ago, but we have flattened, in fact, trended up just a tick. That's what
That is
that's what I
correct.
see,
That is correct.
and that's what you're explaining. Okay, thank you.
This is the tax levy by type. So the large pink portion of the bars are the Fund 10 levy, and this goes back to 2018, 2019. And then the next piece is the Fund 38 levy, and then a Fund 39 levy is above that. And then the Fund 80 levy, you can see it better like in 22, 23 as it gets a little larger. But one thing to take from this is to see that our tax levy as a whole in dollars is it's declining. That is not anything that we could do short of increasing our pupil count, and then also, referendum, or if the state were to increase, allow the districts to increase in the biennium budget.
One thing to note, and this is a pretty good visual for those that can see, is the very top piece is the Fund 80 levy, the community service levy. When we arrived, it was probably about 4 or 5 consecutive years where the levy was $125,000 a year for multiple years. And you can see that represented at the top of 2018, 2019. It stayed the same 1920, and then you could see that when we arrived a few years ago, we were definitely under levying in Fund 80. And what that means is that we very much like to be a community center and have community operations that are available outside of the school day, maybe even during the school day, for all of our taxpayers. So the Fund 80 piece and levying the Fund 80 is our way to actually make sure that we're not negatively hitting our educational funds with community services, okay? So that's why we're increasing that Fund 80 levy, you can see, over 3 years. Because we do want to increase those services, but levy appropriately for it.
And one thing also too with the pink area, that's what we're levying for the general fund. So this year we're levying less, and a big portion of that is due to an increase in state aid, equalization aid. So you have your revenue limit, take off the state aid, and the rest is what you can levy for. So, but as they get smaller, if aid was decreasing also, that causes some concern as well.
Right. So because we receive more state aid, we cannot levy as much.
That's correct. This slide shows the levy by type, as you just saw, but a little smaller, and then the year, what the actual levy in dollars was, the corresponding levy in dollars, and then the property values in billions, and then the levy rate. So going back to 2018, 2019, property values TIF out, this is without the TID districts values, 1.1, a little over $1.1 billion, and a levy rate of $9.42. The next year, probably a little over 350,000 less in the levy, and 1.16 billion of property values, and the levy rate of $8.67. And then property values continue to go up, and levy rate continues to decline. Where this year we're looking at a levy of $9.1 million, and property values projected to be $1.44 billion, and a levy rate of $6.32.
Michelle?
Yes.
Could you explain to the community, to the taxpayers, what might be a disconnect in the understanding of how it is that over 5 years we have seen the budget, the levy in particular, go down by $1 million and $1.3 million, while the property values have gone up, and maybe some of the significance of what has changed in our budgeting, our cash flow needs over that period of 5 years, or maybe even in just the last year.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you in the last 2 years, so if you go back to 2020, 2021, we had a small increase in the revenue limit per pupil. Last year, the state budget gave 0 increase. So if our student count were to stay the same, our student membership were to stay the same, we could not our revenue limit from which our levy is derived would have stayed the same. So that constricts us. And then when you add in aid, so let's say our revenue limit, the maximum that we can receive between state general aid and the tax levy, if that stays the same, we're kind of, we're restricted. Those revenues are not increasing, they're not changing. And then if, as in this year, we are looking at a higher amount of state aid with that same pot of revenue limit, then that is lowering our levy even more. And because of revenue limits, the only way to increase that, like I said, is with our membership, our resident student FTE increasing, going to referendum to exceed the revenue limit, or the state in their biennium budget allowing a per pupil increase.
In other words, that, you got that 64% break to 39%, then if the state or the Department of Education, or somehow another, they budget, they could change that to say 67 or 68% funding for the school district percentage-wise on the levy.
Well, they can not only increase that funding piece, or, they can increase aid.
Yeah.
They can allow the school districts to increase the levy by what they call increase in per member in the revenue limit.
That's the only way they can do it then. Oh.
But to be clear, that 64% is not universal across every district.
No, it's not.
Right, it's
No,
not,
it's not.
there's
Yeah,
some
no, I
districts
agree.
that hardly get anything from the state. Some of the very property wealthy districts don't get a lot of
Well,
money from the
right,
state.
I understand that, yeah.
And it's also based on all those other things like
Yeah.
high poverty levels and free lunch and all of that.
Well, with that being said, are we different, say, than Everest or Stratford as far as the 64%?
Great
That's
question.
that so-called formula? I mean, how does that figure?
I believe we are different. I can look and see what that difference is.
That's interesting.
Yes.
We would,
Yeah,
So we're probably almost assuredly different because it's all based on, well, there's multiple factors, but property valuations is one of the big ones. So depending on Everest and all these other districts, their particular property valuations, they may have less variations or more variations in terms of their property valuations. And then if their student count is going up, then that's certainly going to change the formula
Yeah.
as well. So there's multiple factors that go into the funding
with
for
the student population going down, say where we're at, or at that ratio, then with the so-called the revenue, now, is that figured on property? I was often wondering, if we get richer on property values, are we gonna get less money from the state
yes.
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 each
Yes.
year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it would look like we have more money per student.
Yes.
No, I understand.
Yes.
Yeah, so then that break would change then.
Yes.
We'd have to kick in more,
That's
pay.
correct.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a function of the current.
So the better we get economically, we're gonna have to
Pay.
raise up on,
We have to pay more locally than what the state will pay us.
Unless we increase our student count.
Right.
Thank
That's
you.
the only other way.
yeah.
So I know no one has a crystal ball.
It's a good answers, thank you. Go ahead.
Now, with that being said, as far as inflation, now, next year, say the property value, equalizer valuation was down, then they'd have to readjust that, right? In other words,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, because the October, our property values, we get the certification on October 1st.
Yeah.
And that's later in the slides.
Yeah.
And they use that amount for the final certification of general aid, which comes out on October 15th.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Maple.
So, again, since no one has a crystal ball, but what is going to be our goal in mind at this point in time to where we want the levy rate to roughly be next year, since it went, almost a $2 drop, a $1.80 drop? Is it going to be somewhere in between there? Or is the goal in mind going to be to strive to try to keep it at closer to 6?
Would have been wonderful. You can see, I can answer that as best I can. In the 1920, which was our first year, we were at 867. In our second year, we were very fortunate and able to maintain that steady levy. I think it might be in further slides. If not, we can bring it to an actual a future board meeting. That there's levies for, we have average levies for all the different areas. We're not, you know, if you compare us to districts and what percentage that our levy rate to other districts in our conference, for example, we're by no means above the average. We're below. We're below the average for what we levy. So our recommendation would be for it, we don't have a choice to be at 632, even though that is advantageous to the general public with respect to the taxpayers, and I can understand and appreciate that. It would be better for us to stay at like an 810 or 8 in terms of a levy, I mean, just generally speaking. But there's a lot of other factors in there. But that's in order to maintain services, continue to increase, you know, pay and do, you know, inflation is up for everybody, including the schools. So
I don't remember all of this exactly, but when you get the October numbers, the valuations from the municipalities, including the city, townships in the city, I remember in 2020 to 21, I seem to remember, that when you got those numbers, the new potential levy was that it could have gone down to like 861 or 851.
that's right.
But the board decided to keep it at that 867 level. We had the levy at that, we were allowed to levy at that, and we added those extra dollars into the defeasance fund.
Yes.
We couldn't spend it on current year spending, we could only put it into the sinking fund to pay off the bonds early.
That's right.
That's correct.
Okay,
That's correct. But right now, we are down to such minimal debt.
yeah,
That doing that would
It's-
not save any
we-
money.
right.
Yeah, Michelle and I met with Baird, and we looked at the possibility of another defeasance. We did look at it.
It's like
and
14 cents.
Yeah, it didn't make financial
No.
sense for us to even bring it to the board.
I would
We
agree
held
with
the
that.
meeting, we had the information, and it just wasn't something that we were gonna bring forward. It didn't make financial sense.
Yeah, I would agree.
Do you think that the reason for some of these operating referendums floated by various school districts is for the same reason you're showing here, this diversions where you can't get enough to operate because of you think that goes on?
I do. And someone told me too, that in this part of the state, you know, we're not benefiting from some of these other state programs. If we want to increase, you know, our revenues, we need to go to referendum.
That puts it
And
into
a lot of them are because, I mean, the levy rates are dropping, you're constrained, 0 increase in per pupil revenue limit, so.
That puts it between a rock and a hard place then.
Yes.
Especially in 2026.
Because we can't push that out any further. The payoff of the elementary school, that one slide, that's that real big slide. The science debt, that's spread out for, you know, decade and more. The energy exemption is spread out for a substantial period of time. But Fund 38 debt, we're in a very good position financially with that debt. And it would be good to maintain some sort of Fund 38 debt.
We gotta kind of stack the deck, right? We gotta kind of.
Yes.
Not getting any of us in this room to say that today.
Realistically, I mean, it's kind of crazy, isn't it, when you look at the finance? And this is what bothered me about these operating loans that these people put in for. I mean, I never totally understood it, but I know they aren't bad districts. You know, they're doing the best they can. But when you get caught with the framework like that, I mean, then you got no choice.
You know, and also, when they first implemented revenue limits, you know, many years back, they were where a district was at. So let's say we said, you know, Mosinee said, we're gonna not spend too much this year.
Yeah.
Then that's where they were at. was with that, revenue they generated there.
Yeah, the state does have a surplus
Yes.
right now, so we're interested to see how that works out.
I think the more economically conservative a school district is for the taxpayers, the more difficult it is to be able to plan for the future in a responsible way. Like exactly in different words what Bernie said.
Yeah.
And especially a district like ours, which has this big, compared to other districts, including around here, this large fund balance that allowed us to do this without,
And that was our goal though from way back when. I mean, we said we'd never borrow money again, short-term borrowing, that was off the table, and that goes after a big, the big blowout, where we became a common school district because, I mean, when you're all dead now, but I mean, that being the case, I mean, it's the truth.
not all of us.
Well, some of them are above.
You and I are still here.
Above ground yet, but the rest of them are below ground, but anyhow, I mean, when you think it all over, I mean, it really makes you wonder sometimes, I don't know.
And Mike too.
Maybe slide 15?
Okay.
All right.
So moving forward to finalize what we'll be doing this fall for the budget adoption and tax levy, and this is according to state statute 120.12(3). We will need our October 1st certified values for actual. That will be used for the equalization aid. That will come out on October 15th, the certified aid. And then the board will meet on October 28th, and at that time we'll adopt the budget. The board will adopt the budget and set a levy. And state statute requires a levy to be set on or before November 1st.
Very good presentation, Michelle. Good discussion. All right, is this where I was gonna jump out into a different slide? Or do we move right to the treasurer's report?
If you have no questions, we can go right to it.
Are there any questions? The treasurer report is the next item. Sorry, Dan.
I can't forget. You're the only one on my side.
If there's no questions, we'll move on to the treasurer report.
The treasurer's report, we started, this is for the year ending June 30th, 2022. We had a beginning balance July 1st, 2021 of $8,590,609. This is the general fund. Our general fund revenues were $26,837,391, and general fund expenditures of $27,177,656 gave us an ending fund balance of $8.25 million. We paid debt in 2021-22 of $1.285 million, and current cash and investment balance $7,848,732, and that was as of June 30th, 2022. Part of our annual meeting, we need to disclose and let everyone know about our Fund 73, other post-employment benefit trust. And these are figures for the year ending 6/30/2022. Beginning assets of $5,463,684, liabilities of $68,027, beginning fund balance $5,395,657. During the year, our investments had a return of 1.4. I would say an average return of 1.4. Ending trust assets, $5.2 million. Ending trust liabilities, $74,439. And then our ending fund balance as of, I believe that's wrong, 7/31/22, probably 6/30/2022, $5.1 million for our post-employment benefit trust.
So this is not the Wisconsin retirement, that's
No.
totally separate. Fund 73 is monies that the board is putting aside to make sure that we're taking care of our staff members after they retire. So there were substantial changes to Fund 73, benefits for both teachers and full year support staff. This is where that comes from.
Can you specify a little bit more as to what this goes toward in terms of post-employment benefits?
Our post-employment benefit, we have two structures, well, three, possibly, yeah, three. We have our teacher structure, that is a 403B. There's, I believe, 3 tiers in that teacher structure. Part of it is paid out in a 403B when they retire. Part of it is an HRA to use towards insurance premiums when they retire. And then in tiers, the lower tiers, the bottom 2 tiers, there's also a 403B match. So when a teacher puts into their 403B, the district will match a portion of that each year. And then there's an administrative benefit. I believe that is only HRA.
Correct.
And then there's a support staff benefit that is a combination, similar to the teachers, a 403B match and then an HRA annual contribution.
Does the
for retirement.
post-employment benefit for health insurance come out of this?
Yes.
Okay, so then add health insurance to that.
Yes.
Meaning that for retired staff, any retired staff who are accessing health insurance funds post-retirement, it comes out of Fund 73.
It also required a minimum length of service in the district.
Yes. I believe that might have been 15.
I think 15
minimum.
years, I believe.
And I think there was people grandfathered in different levels based on
Correct.
that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, typically speaking, do other districts in our area have an additional post-employment benefit like this district does beyond WRS, Wisconsin Retirement System? Do you know?
I believe most districts have tried to end their post-employment benefits. Yeah, and we've actually increased ours. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for our staff to retain and attract staff.
Now the interest on this here, is that compound, and are you locked into a certain time segment for this?
The
Or-
interest is, they're paying interest monthly
Okay.
on this, and we are in the process, we've already started moving some of our funds. We were kind of blocked, kind of in an annuity product with Mid-America, and we're moving funds over to the Wisconsin OPEB Trust. It's a several-year process, and that has different investments and different rates.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And then this is just an overview of the proposed general fund budget. With the beginning fund balance, 8.2 million, general fund receipts, 26,016,878, general fund expenditures, 26,666,466, and a planned deficit of 649,588, with, I believe it was 900 and some thousand is a transfer to Fund 46 for the middle school addition, cafeteria addition
Just to
project.
reiterate, the planned deficit has to do with us paying cash for the middle school project.
Resulting in an ending fund balance of $7,600,756, which is approximately 28% fund balance. Of the expenditures, our proposed tax levy, all funds, $9,125,887. And then debt, principal, and interest payments for Fund 38 and 39 this year of $1.9 million.
With that being said, is our financial situation here, the way it's managed, how comparable is that with other school districts? Do they have some kind of a minimum fund balance? I know, I see when they go out shopping for operating funds, a lot of them, they're just totaled out. There's nothing there at the end of the year. I mean, they have to borrow just to get the thing greasing the axle again. So I was just curious in my head, just sitting here as you're going through these numbers, it seems like we're financially, we're really in a rich position.
Yes, we're in a good position, yes.
And, I mean, that's good.
And I know it varies amongst, you
Yeah,
know, I know
yeah.
I just read Stratford is
Yeah.
going to operational
And
referendum.
Athens is in bad shape over there, they got nothing, I noticed, in their fund balance at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Merrill, cash flow
Oh,
borrows.
yeah, yeah.
Certain districts intentionally short-term borrow.
Yes.
They spend their fund balance, not all, but certain, you see this, you're talking about it. But certain districts intentionally spend their fund balance down below 10% even.
Yeah. Oh,
And then
yeah,
they
there's nothing.
and then they short-term borrow as a financial possibility.
That really puts yourself in a restrictive position as far as options though.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't play the casino game at all then. Now you're stuck. You gotta wait for that referendum returns then. And then if you don't get it, then you're really there. You're in the basement.
We're in a solid financial position, which is represented by us paying cash for a project that other districts go to
Well,
referendum.
most of them could never even think about that.
Right.
I mean, it's off the table. I mean, this is just incredible when you think about the whole scheme of things. I mean, that they have to, anybody looking at this, they have to be awful envious of us to be able to pull this off and still have a fund balance of what we got and lower the tax rate besides. I mean, this is getting your candy and cake all in one scoop, you know. Yeah, this is great. I mean, I'm not criticizing it or anything like that, you know. It's good stuff. Yeah.
Mrs. Gorman, if we
Okay.
could,
Moving on to number 8.
item 8. Right.
The authorization of the 2022-23 tax levy advisory only. So seeking a motion. Do I have to read the whole thing, or is everybody, you should have it in your packet, correct?
Just the therefore usually is what you read.
Yeah. And I really have to get my glasses on.
Which part?
Just the therefore. Isn't there one?
No?
Oh, they're all be it resolved.
Yep.
Oh, I forgot, sorry.
I can read it if you like.
I'm fine if you let it. So be it resolved that a school tax be assessed advisory only against all taxable property within the district in the sum of $9,125,887,000, which is necessary to operate and maintain the district school system and to finance the recommended budget and the debt service obligations. General Fund, Fund 10, $6,867,296. Non-referendum Debt Service Fund 38, $945,904. Referendum Debt Service Fund 39, $712,687. And Community Service Fund, Fund 80, $600,000.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Peter and a second by Jess. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 9, authorization for board to provide transportation for public and non-public schools. Be it resolved that the school board of the Mosinee School District, Marathon County, State of Wisconsin, be authorized to provide transportation service at district expense to all pupils outside the Mosinee City established by said school board, section 121.54, paren 2, paren 3. Be it resolved that the school board of the School District of Mosinee, Marathon County, State of Wisconsin, be authorized to provide transportation services at district expense to all resident pupils enrolled in a private school situated not more than 5 miles beyond the boundaries of the school district measured along the usually traveled routes.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by David and a second by Mike. Any questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 10, authorize the board to provide school lunches. Be it resolved that the school board of the School District of Mosinee, Marathon County, State of Wisconsin, is hereby directed to furnish school lunches to any and all students in this district at such places and times and such cost as shall be set by the school board, and the school board is hereby authorized to pay any deficiencies which may result from said lunch program. Section 120.10, paren 16.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
We have a motion by Kelly and a second by Amy. Any questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Item 11, set salary and expense reimbursement for school board members. Be it resolved that school board members shall receive $200 per meeting attended to a maximum of 14 meetings, 12 monthly meetings plus 2 special meetings, plus an additional stipend of $200 when attending 14 meetings. The school board members will also receive $200 per expulsion meeting attended up to a maximum of 4 per year. They shall receive $200 per diem for attending outside conferences or meetings, subject to the limits identified in the next paragraph. The maximum compensation for a school board member not attending a national conference or serving on an interview committee shall be $5,000 per year. School board members who attend a national conference shall receive up to 4 additional per diem days as compensation.
Turn. You got more?
I got more?
Yep, there's 2 mini paragraphs.
I got 2 more.
Thank you. School board members who serve on the interview committee to hire an administrator shall receive an additional compensation of $200 per day. Be it further resolved that board members be reimbursed for their actual and necessary expenses up to the limits defined by the board policy when traveling outside the district to perform school board duties in accordance with state statutes.
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion by Kelly. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
And a second by Bernie. Questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. Next item, other authorized business. This is a standing agenda item for purposes bringing up any other issues that occur from the time this agenda is posted to the time this meeting occurs.
I don't have any notification of other items.
Any other items? Okay. Moving on. Setting the date and time for the 2023 annual meeting. Set the 2023 annual meeting for September 26, 2023 at 7 p.m. at the District Educational Service Center.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion by David and a second by Peter. Any questions?
One question I do have, is that gonna fall on that regional meeting again?
Look that up.
It's hard to see.
The October meeting is the one that falls in the regional meeting.
That's right. Yeah, it's not September.
The October board meeting, we moved it a day, we moved it a week later because we don't have the certification numbers in on time to have our meeting on the regular third Tuesday.
Okay. Got it.
Any other questions?
So, I mean, next April, we could decide, you know what, we could decide as a board, maybe we'll do our October meeting on Monday night, the night before that one.
Sure.
By then, we'll know when
Okay.
the WASB regional meetings are.
Okay.
So we could do that. But I would like to see that put into the minutes for, kind of a separate set of minutes, so that we can discuss that at our April scheduling meeting for our board meetings,
Okay.
right? So that's a good point.
Any other questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry. The last item, adjournment.
I'll also move the minutes.
Are we gonna do
No.
minutes?
We're gonna do
No,
it.
they do it at
We-
the next meeting.
Yep.
So we approve the minutes
From,
of the ones that are in the packet
Right.
at our October 2021 regular board meeting.
Okay.
We reviewed and accepted them. Sarah and I talked a lot about that this week.
Yes, that's very confusing.
okay,
I would so
I'll make a
move.
motion that we adjourn.
okay.
Mike?
Yes,
Sure,
Bernie.
we'll get Bernie
Bernie.
and then Mike. Any questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry.
Your meeting was 4 minutes shorter than Mr. Barnes's last year.
Imagine.